Good. All right. So, hi everyone. Welcome to Think Up, and I am honoured to be joined by Zilja,
Yeah, very good.
not Silja. So, if anyone's watching this and see her name tagged, you now know it's Zilja, and you can never ever mention it in the incorrect way again. So, really honoured to be joined by you. And how we got to this stage was that I found your app EQ, and then saw you, and I think we have some mutual friends. I'm pleased to say that I've actually completed EQ, all the levels,
Wow.
and I have my personality assessment screenshot. I screenshotted my
Oh, wow. Okay, that's very cool. And how do you feel about it? Does that reflect your own opinion of yourself?
um yeah. I mean, to be honest, I would, most of the questions in the game I would have answered in the way I kind of knew which ways the biases would have wanted me to answer the questions, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, 90% of the time it's actually honestly how I would have dealt with the situation. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm into thinking, and
Yeah.
I studied behavioral economics before it was called behavioral economics. It was called social psychology in the late 80s, and I was one of the first ever people to go through neurolinguistic programming courses in the Bandler and Grindler background, and then I've deep into neuroeconomics since then, and so forth. So I kind of had a
A hunch.
hunch, also maybe a choice supported bias.
Mm.
But anyway, so to take a step back, could you tell everyone who's watching this what it is that you're doing now, but also how you got to where you got to?
Okay, so like you just introduced, thank you for having me today, by the way. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Zilja Litvin. I'm a clinical psychologist and founder of PsyCaps, and we are kind of using the know-how of the gaming industry to make mental health apps that are sticky. So when you study psychology, you learn all about symptoms and treatments and all the things about like the back ideas of psychology and things like that, but you don't learn about the health system. And when I moved into London in 2013, I started working with NELFT, which is a part of the NHS, and it works with eating disorders and mood disorders for young adults. And I was really shocked to hear that people had been on waiting lists for half a year and sometimes longer to get just 6 sessions with a psychologist. So I had been looking when I did my master's in psychology, I had been looking at research of evidence-based web-based interventions and saw that they're almost as effective as face-to-face therapy. So it's this great opportunity to help millions of people on their laptops and computers. And I thought that should be able to be translated into mobile because people are moving away from the big screen, everything's going on your phone. And it would be a way also to make democratize therapy so that everybody has access to it. So we designed an application, we went through a clinical trial, and we could prove that using the app, it's still in the App Store, it's called PsyCaps E, over 4 weeks significantly lowered depression levels, almost to the level of a beta blocker. So I was like, yay, let's go out and save the world. Well, the problem with mental health apps is that they aren't sticky enough. So the reason why people stick to therapy, and even though the drop-off rate for therapy is quite high, is that people go to see their therapist. They have an interpersonal connection with their therapist. And when you take that away, you're left with a self-help book that is a little bit interactive maybe, or you have your gratitude list and your journals and things like that. And it's just work. And if you're just coming from home from uni or work, or you've had a long day and you're not feeling well anyway, are you really going to sit down and then go through your exercises and read a lot? And then if you have clients who are struggling with mental illness, you have a lot of side effects or symptoms like lack of curiosity, lack of motivation, cognitive impairment, right? So it's harder to concentrate and to learn anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought it's too good an opportunity to not try to take this platform of apps and spread mental health. So we have to find a way to kind of trick people into doing what's good for them. And how do we doing that? We're doing it by making it a game. And so 70% of our target audience, which is 18 to 28-year-olds, are casual gamers, from Angry Birds to My Story to, all the other games that are out there right now on mobile version. Excuse me. So what we're doing is teaching psychological skills in a fun way, and then you have to implement them in a choose your own adventure story. And that also helps kind of make it, you're practicing in a safe but still stimulating environment. And 82% of our players say that they go out into the real world the following week and implement the skills that they learned in the game. So it has a direct impact.
Yeah, I like the fact that there's in each level there's two kind of exercises where various different biases or heuristics are introduced, and then there's a story. And as you got the mountain, the metaphorical mountain in the game, and I like the usage of the story. What I found quite pleasing was that it, despite the graphics, which are very accessible, and I can see the target audience that is kind of the target audience cartoonish graphics. It's not childlike stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even with the couple who are in the windmill hiding Germans. It's kind of like they're in depth. It's a pretty in depth story arc, each one, and I mean, my take on it in general is that I'm surprised that I've downloaded, I think, pretty much every popular or known brain or emotion app from all app stores. Because I'm fascinated by this space, and they seem to be in kind of 4 categories, which you seem to be populating. Q, your app, seems to be populating the 4th category on its own, which is the kind of the emotional intelligence building. But the other categories seem to be around memory. There's a lot of memory training stuff. There is a lot of meditation stuff. Then there is the problem-solving, puzzle-solving side of it. And then there's emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Is that what you found? Have I misseen the spectrum? Or are you in a populated field of apps doing the same thing as yours, or are you kind of standing on your own there?
I think we're quite unique. Because so much is happening in the mental health space, especially the mobile world, I go and I do certain keywords like once a week or once every 2 weeks to make sure I haven't overlooked everything. And there are 1 or 2 games that are trying to tackle emotional mental health. So, for example, the memory training and the cognitive training, those are like cognitive mental health, and these are a problem for Alzheimer's, dementia, and information processing, and that's important too. But our big scourge for young people is emotional mental health, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, things like that, sleep. So it's really, really hard to teach that in an app form, right? And so our space is populated, but they're usually like CBT training applications or thought diaries, or thought journals, or mood trackers, or something like that. And, in itself, there are apps out there that probably have higher effect sizes than us. But the problem is that if people don't stick to it, the best app in the world is not going to help anyone, right? So, if it's boring, and I'm not saying that EQ is top of the game, like there's so much you can do to make it better. And we're fundraising right now so that we can mature the game, make sure that there's more actual gaming elements, deepen the connection to the storyline and things like that. So there's a lot of room for improvement. But I think we're pretty alone in the fun, emotional mental health that's actually evidence-based. So we did our first clinical trial, and we're evidence-based now. And we can prove, so the concept is that it's a 5-week course, and you do a level a week. And if you really do that for the 5 weeks, you significantly raise your resilience, which is the biggest predictor against developing a mental health issue. You build your personal development skills, which is like goal setting and getting achievements and getting ahead in work life and university and things like that. Interpersonal relationship skills. One of the biggest scourges of the 18 to 20-year-olds is the feeling of isolation and disconnectivity. And the last one is anxiety. So it significantly lowers anxiety, pretty much on the level of a pharmaceutical.
Right.
So you have this product, which is prevention and low intervention, that is as holistic as we can make it, that is kind of covering all of the human skills needed to be able to process emotional and mental stress.
Yeah, and I think you've done that really well. Do you feel that there's would you say that this is in some way standing in the face of or against or contrary to traditional pharmaceutical remedies?
Yes, so I think we're moving very strongly towards digital pharmaceuticals, and there are actually 3 apps that have gone through FDA approval. 2 are for addiction, opioid and alcohol substance abuse addictions, and 1 is for ADHD for children. And they are actually almost twice as effective as pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
So because a lot of the mental health issues, emotional mental health issues, are about thought processing and emotional regulation and things like that, as well as chemical imbalance. So there will always be people who need medication, right? But for a certain amount of the population, I think that you don't need to take medication to get better. So I'm not demonizing medication. I think it's very, very important. It's saving lives every day. But there is a certain amount of the population that do not need to take medication. They would need therapy, but they don't have the money, the time, or they're not ready to do therapy.
So could you imagine a time when your app, not just in this state, but in any future state, is prescribed by a general practitioner? Could that
Yeah.
be?
Yeah, that's what we're working towards. And kind of like the game is, we always want to have that preventative aspect, because there's a lot of people that if they had a certain skill set and they go into a triggering situation in life, be it being dumped, being hurt, losing a job, whatever it is, losing a loved one, that they will have the skills to be able to be resilient and not get, go into mental illness. But we will be funneling a certain amount of the population that are flagged as probably mental ill into certain parts of the game that are specialized on treating anxiety or depression, PTSD, and whatever we will be able to develop in the course of the game. And they will be able to be prescribed. We're going towards FDA approval, and they will also be able to be reimbursed by insurance companies.
Interesting. That's really good. How long do you think that will take for the FDA approval?
Oh dear. That's, only so far 3 people have done it, and it's apparently really, really painful and very expensive. So what we're doing right now is we have done the first clinical trial. We're setting up for the second clinical trial that will get us into the spot where we're starting FDA approval. And I'm assuming it will take at least a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so some of the fundraising that you're doing is to fund that, I guess.
Yes. So, and also to move towards a subscription model, because the 5-week course, we've already proven that it has an effect on people's lives, right? But usually when you have a treatment that's a short treatment, like CBT, that's a 6-week treatment or things like that, you have a spike in the effect. And then over time, what happens is you often go towards the baseline of where you were before over a course of half of a year, 2 years, things like that. So if you go in a subscription model where a new story and a new opportunity to learn new skills and to practice old skills, then something happens called cognitive restructuring, which is kind of like a permanent change in the way you process information, and then you won't go back to the baseline.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by that, and also the study of epigenetics in specific. I'm enamored by the truth and the science behind not only that restructuring happening in terms of thought and cognition, but also because our body structures itself based on emotion, and it doesn't know the difference between an experience that creates the emotion versus an emotion created by a thought. And so And our environmental experience signals our genes to turn off and on various different chemical properties.
Yeah.
And all our genes make proteins, and the proteins are responsible for the structure and the function of our and our body then essentially begins to change into its future state based on our thinking. So if we think about the future in one way, our body is actually living in the future in the present moment.
Yeah.
So that your restructuring of cognition is unarguably also a restructuring of our genetic makeup.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I'm not very knowledgeable in the field. Like, I have the things that you just mentioned. I think I've read one or two articles about them, and it kind of makes sense. But I can't really. I don't have like the professional expertise, but it makes sense.
Yeah, and I've one of the greatest thinkers and researchers is Dr. Joe Dispenza, but I mean, I feel what you're doing is actually part of the same field, and which I find very, very exciting. The next frontier, I think, in psychology will be the direct chemical link between our thinking and our health.
It's such a no-brainer. And you know what? I think that if we can keep on doing this path, that we will be teaching our kids in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade all the things that my app is doing now for young adults, and we will be giving the skill sets at home, and it will be part of our learnings.
Yes.
And if not, we have failed miserably.
That's quite right. Speaking of the younger kids, can you imagine so your target group at the moment is 16 to 28, did you say?
18 to 28,
18
yes.
to
But we have players that are 14, 15 as well.
Sure,
but we don't target them.
And a player who was 46 as well, you know.
And a player, there you go.
Am I the oldest ever player?
No, not by far. We have a 72-year-old who loves the game. Yeah.
I thought I was going to win that award. Is there a market to the far, far, far younger generation that you have on as a roadmap? Are you thinking that might be something next to look at, how to address the preschools, the primary schools?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. So one of the reasons why I did target the 18 to 28-year-old is because that's the age range that statistically, if you're going to develop a mental health issue, it's going to be manifesting in that age, right? It's the age where you have most life changes, you know, your first relationship, first heartbreak, moving out of home, first job, university, all these kind of things that are important and wonderful life challenges, but, you know, they're very stressful. And it's the generation that is starting to kind of become aware about their own responsibilities towards their own well-being, right? And they are underserved. So if you look at the apps, the mental health apps for children, there are lots. And there are a lot of, for the dementia and Alzheimer's, there's lots of products, right? Which is also important because we're having an aging population. But I feel that the 18 to 28-year-olds are being kind of like left behind, and they are suffering the most. So in comparison with the rest of the population, 29% of this age range is living with a diagnosis, right? So, and that's, I think, 12% of the rest of the population in that, you know, older or younger. So where I do think that I should probably start younger, around 13 to 15, I don't think that I would go in towards children. I don't think so. But, okay, you know, we don't know. Maybe we're going to have so many products that it's just kind of like, let's take care of the kids too.
Yeah, I mean, and there's it's one of the entrepreneur's challenges, isn't it? Is to how omnipotent to believe we are, and whether or not we focus on a niche, if you like, and really maximize that niche rather than, you know, and that's what Steve Jobs did when he came back into Apple. He got rid of like 100 different product lines and said, we're actually 3 macro product lines. Mm-hmm. We're going to have items inside each of those three product lines. Mm-hmm. And so I can see the niche argument quite well. Are you on a kind of a slightly it's related to the investment raising side? it's kind of a question for myself as opposed to anyone watching, I'd imagine. Are you finding it difficult to raise money for something that is in theory less obvious to many investors?
Not necessarily. I think there has been a huge spike in media awareness of mental health, and thanks to like the prince and princess or duchess, and to people coming out, celebrities worldwide coming out and talking about it, to the World Health Organization pushing it to all the charities and things. So I seldom have an investor that does not know about mental health. So I blew someone's mind the other day, and he says, 1 in 4, and I'm like, yeah, dude, like under which rock have you been sleeping? But I think they know the market is there, but they don't understand the problem well enough to go aha. So they're cautious. There are so many apps out there that are trying to make a way, and everybody has a slightly different approach, and no one has, no one's the unicorn yet. Like, so in the well-being, mental well-being space, Calm is our first unicorn. Headspace is not far behind. So they know there's money in that space, right? But it's probably, monopolized. But in the mental health space, nobody has managed that yet. And so they're very, very cautious, and it's a bit painful to kind of like try to explain why we think we're the ones. And I just came back from the American Psychology Association. We had a booth there in Chicago, and it was so nice because we were standing there with our booth, and the psychologists would be coming by like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And I'd be like, right? Like, they get it. I don't have to talk. I don't have to upsell. It's just kind of like, boom, done,
Yeah.
So, and that gave me a lot of energy to kind of like go back to my fundraising when I'm back and just say, it's some people get it.
and I certainly get it. You made the app using Unity, which, and I think the environment is beautiful. How did you pay for the app to be made? Because it doesn't seem like a very cheaply made app. It's quite a slick build.
Thank you. So we did a friends and family round of 200K in 2017, and we launched in 2018. And we partnered with a game development company called Collision Studios, and they had worked with Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, Barbie, Scrabble, you name it, like 30 odd games under their belt.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. That's and that partnership, did they take some equity in the company, or did you?
Yeah, so it was half equity, half cash.
Okay.
Yeah. And to be honest, I don't think we would have been able to do it without a game development company. And because if you look at most of the applications, they are either made by people who would have needed a product at some time, like BetterHelp or SuperBetter, or they've been made from academics like Sam. And they're not quite on the consumer point, or they're not quite clinical, right? But to have this marriage between the consumer, which is a game development company, and an academic group, like my academic board is amazing. Like, I have Professor Peter Fonagy on my advisory board. Like, I learned about him in university, and now he's on my advisory board. So it's very potent to have that mix.
Yes, I agree with that. It's actually triggered another thought in my head, that is whether the art of play, I mean, it's demonstrably true that our ability to recall is 10x'd by learning through play as opposed to learning on rote. So I'm wondering whether in the area of mental health, whether play and gamification will become a kind of a standard delivery mechanism for that.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So what happens when you learn something in an unexpected and a fun way, you release dopamine, and the neurotransmitter is not just kind of like a pleasant feeling, but it also is like a post-it note for your memory. So the probability that you'll remember it is much higher. So interlinking learning with fun is really important. What is psychology and what is therapy? It's learning. It's getting a different aspect and getting new information and incorporating that in the way we process information. So it's kind of, a no-brainer.
Yes.
Add that casual games, if you play them casually, actually are good for your mental health as well, because they're a distraction, they help you focus and things like that. So it's positive as well. And then, also just the aspect of adding joy to people's lives, mental health is stressful enough as it is. We don't have to go and make it like really high intensity, fearful. You sit in an office, you sit in front of someone. I mean, that's very empowering as well, but some people are really scared about it, and that's why they don't do it.
Mm. Yeah, I think one of the challenges I have as a author and speaker is that it is to how to translate the information into ways that people find easier to digest than the scientific jargon, the acronyms and terms. I funny enough, when I was doing my neuroeconomics course that I finished recently, from the Russian School of Higher Economics, it was so technical. The course was so technical that it took quite a while to actually just try
learn the terminology.
Yeah, exactly. Just the terminology was just like, but it could be done with no. I'm not actually discrediting the school at all, and I'm happy. 93% pass and everything, but
congratulations.
Thank you. I think probably the last 7% was due to the fact that I genuinely wasn't smart enough to understand half the words that were being used. But I'm wondering whether or not we as collective educators or have a mission in itself to make things easy to understand. I think what you've done with the app is you've kind of balanced this fine line well, I think, between making something that's patronizing, that you've made something not patronizing but easy to understand in plain English, that also has, like Joy, for instance, and for those watching, Joy is the kind of narrator, I guess, or the guide of EQ. Joy, in the morning when I'd wake up and Joy would say, I hope, hi Jonathan, hope you slept well. You've been bossing the scores recently. Let's see how you do today. And it's that I didn't feel as if I was being spoken down to. It seemed informal enough. It didn't seem like I was being taught something, but actually I was being taught something.
Oh, that is really good to hear, because it was really hard, and my development team and I were constantly in a clinch because I wanted to have more information in there, and they wanted less words, and they wanted to have it more formal. And then I got my butt kicked by there is a social rights activist who has done amazing work with children in the States, and she loved the concept of the app, and she sat down with me and she said, "Your app is classist." And I was like, "What?" And we have two versions. One is Dr. Joy, and she wears like a white thing, and she has glasses, and she has a chart. And I thought it would be helpful for people to have an authoritative figure to be able to learn for it, because it gives you the safety that the information that you're getting is right. So it's kind of like a shortcut. A doctor is telling me this, so it must be right kind of information. And she said that it instantly divides a certain amount of the population from the information, because they feel there's a power structure in there, and that's it's too difficult. And so we went through the whole game, and we passed it through a couple of more focus groups a few times, and we had another version of Joy, just kind of like with a story behind that. This is a person who's went through it herself, and now she's just there to kind of like tell you about it.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a shock, but it's important to get this feedback. And as a psychologist, and I'm on the verge of getting my PhD, I'm in a bubble that all those terminology and everything that you're talking about, you lose the overview of what is normal and what is easily understandable and what isn't.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because I like the fact that it's not a kind of a hierarchical. I could imagine actually there's that the hierarchical feeling of being told something by a doctor isn't as easy to digest, and I can see that actually.
Yeah, we're running an A/B test right now and seeing if people stay on longer between the doctor and just Joy, and there hasn't been a difference yet, but statistically I think we just need more people to see.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so just in a final, I've just got one final question actually, Actually, no. Firstly, if people want the app, they go to any app store. Is it just on Apple?
Any app store.
Any app
Apple, Android, just EQUOO, and then the Emotional Fitness Game.
Perfect.
And it's free to play.
Great. And your website to people, is there a reason to send people to the site as well, or to find out more about you? Or?
Well, if they're curious about the game a little bit more, if they want to have a sniff around or see the science behind it, then they can go on the website. And there's also a link to downloading from the website, and that's EQUOO game.com.
Perfect. Good stuff. Okay, my final question is this. Do you feel that we are, in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, going to turn a corner in mental health where it is not only prioritized centrally in our understanding and education, but also where we start taking these things so far more seriously that, in fact, apps like yours would be funded 100 times faster than throwing birds and pigs?
I think so, yes, because people now only are understanding the economic impact. And at the end of the day, it's always about money, right?
Yes.
So, for example, presenteeism, being at work, but not being able to function, cost each employer about $3,000 a year, right? And so once they understand that there will be tools that makes people happy, that's good. They don't want anybody to suffer unnecessarily unless it saves money. Then they will understand that investing in their employees' mental health is something good. So I think that a maybe not so good mindset is going to push the positive impact of mental health. So there's going to be less crime, less wars, less poverty. Everybody who is mentally healthy is less likely to hurt other people and themselves. And when I'm not saying that mentally ill people hurt other people, they're much more likely to become victim of crime. But I'm saying that people who are mentally unbalanced and don't understand themselves may show different forms of aggression than if they understood and would be able to process their emotions better.
Well said. Good. Well, and I forgot to thank you also for the free ebook that I got when I signed up for updates. That was really good on the emotional biases side of things. It was a really good PDF to receive as well. That's a nice.
Thank you.
So yes, thanks for joining, and it's been really insightful on various levels actually. And sorry for the nosy questions. I hope it didn't come across as too intrusive.
Absolutely not. This was really interesting, and I love talking about my baby all day long. So.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Great. Well, listen, I will post this video up, and then I'll tag you in it as well in the Think Up group. Yeah. Share it socially.
And please feel free to leave a review if you liked it.
Oh yes, right. That is the type of payment that I owe you in exchange for this interview. So I will do a review immediately.
Thank you very much. Then have a great day.
Thanks, Zilja, and hopefully I'll speak to you again one day.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Bye.